Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. Tonight we are going to be looking at some prophecies that might be coming to pass in 2025. Now I want to give a full disclaimer. Man, I don't know when the Lord's coming back, but things are crazy, right? I mean, goodness, what happened in Syria? Of course, things are going, crazy in the Middle East. We have technology. I don't know. I keep thinking we're making Skynet from Terminator. Like I just keep wondering, like, does nobody see we're making Skynet like right at the very moment, right? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But to help us decode what is going to maybe happen this next year, we have a special guest, Abraham Ojeda. He used to live in the Denver area. He moved away, sadly. But it's great to have him back. And, of course, everybody else on the show. So, hey, it's so great to have you with us, Abraham. And, of course, my other two amazing co-hosts. And also, we want to let people know that we just started a Telegram group. I put the invitation in the chat. So please do sign up. We're keeping it private for now. We may change it to public. But we wanted to at least have a place where we can all just kind of chat, or, kind of keep it on prophecy kind of stuff. That's the basic idea. All right. And we will be monitoring it. So if you get too out of line, you're out. But let's just have fun. Let's have a great discussion. So, that's it. Hey, Abraham, great. Thanks for being here and kind of give us a rundown of your ministry, your insights, what you've been working on. Love to hear it.
Yes, guys. First of all, seriously, I thank you from the bottom of my heart just for inviting me on. I remember watching you, Doug, your channel and your work back in 2016, man. So when let me just run back, okay? If I was not really born into a Christian household, I kind of was, but it was very nominal. But I got into drugs as a teen, and my parents were kind of in damage control mode, and so I basically ended up going to church a lot from the ages 14 onward. And I really heard the gospel message as a little kid one time at a Spanish church. So Spanish is my first language. Doug, you totally nailed my last name, Ojeda. You got it right. Appreciate that, brother. I know you speak Spanish too. But so anyways, fast forwarding, I heard God at these mega churches. I knew it wasn't the guy on stage, right? Because I went to a lot of mega churches with my parents. And God bless them, they did the best they could, and ultimately, I ended up making a decision for Christ when I was 16, right around there. Ended up going to, because I wanted to be serious, right? I wanted to be a good Christian.
Right, of course.
I went to Pensacola Christian College, four-year college. I didn't study just seminary studies in that, but I always took Bible courses. It's required to graduate. I ended up becoming a chemist. Actually, when I first met your congregation, which I'll get to in a second, Doug, I was working as a chemist in Denver, newlywed. Met my wife in New Orleans. We moved to Denver together, and long story short, we, as a married couple, back in 2016 and 17 was a big year for both me and my wife. Our journeys are very much intermixed, obviously with coming to Torah, right? So. Right. All my life, I had been in Sunday Christian churches, Sunday Christian atmospheres. And, something just didn't add up. We've all been there. It's like, why are we eating Passover? Or we're not eating Passover lamb. We're eating, Easter ham. What's up with all the Christmas trees? What's up with all the stuff? What are the roots of it? The more we dug and the more we were like, something's not right. Let me just keep digging. Let me figure out what's so disconnected from what I see with the apostles, with the book of Acts, with everything there. It's so disconnected from what I'm seeing. And so actually, Doug, your ministry was one of the first ministries that I really came across. I'm trying to think of who else was around that time. There was Mark Call, Shabbat Shalom Mesa. There was your ministry, and there was Restoration Messianic over in Boulder area. But that was really far away. I think Lighthouse, I checked them out. But I was searching, guys. I was hungry. And Yeshua HaMashiach did not let me down. I have been filled over and above. But it hasn't always been an easy journey either. And I'd love to share some of those things with you guys, if that's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, we were called out of the Denver metro. It's just something that had been on our hearts for a long time. So right now I live about 8 hours away from the Denver metro where I was living. I lived there for 3 years. And, long story short, that's just, a lot of us that get into, okay, let's go back and embrace our Hebrew ancestry, who we are in Christ, our identity. A lot of us get agriculturally minded. I was one of those that was led that way. And so, these days I'm an off-grid shepherd. This is all solar power run, what I'm doing here, right? Which is really cool. I never thought I'd be in this position, but God has blessed me tremendously. We have sheep and goats. We're kind of focusing on meat this year, hopefully a little bit more, wool production and stuff like that. We got a lot of things we're trying to figure out. So that's a little bit of my story and just going from the city, coming here. Maybe we can talk about some off-grid stuff, some prepper survival stuff, because I know, like you said, the world is very unstable right now. We see a lot of World War III geopolitics stuff. It's really crazy, unprecedented things, like a country like Syria collapsing overnight, and falling into the hands of extremists, terrorist organizations. So, it's unstable. Maybe we can talk about some of those things. I do want to share one thing too, though, if I may, just talking about something so you had mentioned, what are you doing with ministry? What are you doing with that kind of thing right now? I'd like to touch on that. Sorry, I know it's a little long-winded of an intro, guys, but
it's all good.
Yeah. I started a YouTube channel like a lot of us do, right? When we have a burden to reach people with, the whole counsel of God. We don't necessarily have it all figured out, but, walking in Torah, walking in Yeshua, walking in the ancient path. And guys, I got to be totally honest with you. I've shared this, testimony over on the YouTube channel quite a few times. In 2019, it was November. It was just a few months before the whole world changed in 2020. I was in a tough spot actually with my marriage and everything else, really hit a rough patch. And I got to be honest with you guys, even though I found Torah and I was blessed and it was really good and I understood it was the ancient path, so many things were just confirmed to me. I struggled a lot actually with being very consistent in my walk, and it's just it was always kind of a struggle. There were some generational curses, addictions, and I've come clean about those things with my wife and so forth, But we were having a lot of rocky things going on. 2019 was very pivotal. There was one day where my wife's like, let's just get a divorce and let's just go our separate ways. I know we built a homestead together. We did all these things, but let's just, I'm like, yeah, I'm totally done too. And I woke up early the next morning, guys. This absolutely fundamentally changed my life. It's part of the journey and everything. So I'm so passionate about it, but I woke up in the morning early and I didn't want I didn't want to lose everything. I didn't want to, split everything in half and go our separate ways and all this other nonsense. It's like, no, I was called to be married. I know I was. There's so much confirmation in everything I've been doing. Why is this such a struggle? And I was so broken, man. I was weeping. It was like 4 or 5 a.m. in my kitchen. My wife's asleep, and I just start crying to God, like, why has my walk with you been so difficult, guys? Because even when we get to this place of understanding the need for obedience, but we also understand the grace of Christ. Even that was a struggle. So there's something in the way. And I opened up the Gospel of Matthew to chapter 4, and it talks about Yeshua being in the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, and the people there have seen a great light. And I was like, oh, okay, well, because I'm like, God, I just need to hear something from you. And I open up my Bible, and right when it says he was healing the sick, he was healing all kinds of people that are afflicted with infirmities, and he was casting out demons. The words just popped out of the page at me that day in November 2019. It was just like, bam. And I was like, what does this mean? What do I do with this? And the Holy Spirit spoke to me. He's like, you need to cast out an unclean spirit from yourself. And I'm like, what? Well, no one's ever taught me to do this. I don't even know what this is. I'm like, all right. If this is what I said, I didn't even know what I was doing, guys. I said, if there is a demonic entity, unclean spirit, or something that's hindering my walk in Christ, come out right now in the name of Yeshua. Come out right now. And I laughed because I said it out loud, and I was kind of like laughing. I was like, did I just say that? And all of a sudden, a split second later, I felt a vibration in my chest. Okay.
Wow. And
it vibrated up through my neck, and I felt like I was physically going to be sick because it went through my eyes and I lost my vision. And then something lifted off of my head. And my first question in prayer, I was like, Lord, was that you? What was that? He's like, no, what did you just pray? And I was like, oh, well, it was a demon. It was really a demon. Like, this is real. This is actually, like, this is how the world works. This is all that stuff I read in my Bible is actually applicable. Like, that actually happens. So that was the beginning of a great awakening for me. My life has never been the same since then. Launched Overcome Babylon Kingdom Secrets Academy in 2022. And so I've been at it for 2 years by God's grace. I never intended to do this type of stuff, but I wrote 2 books, Bible Prophecy Secrets 1 and 2. I give them away for free. Anybody can download them from my websites. So that has been the journey, man. And it's all been about prophecy. That's what God has really, he's revealed a lot of things, and I would love to share some of those insights, but I'm just like you guys. I'm just like anybody else. I'm just a sinner saved by grace at the end of the day.
Well said. Well said.
What are you thinking is going to happen in 2025 based on your studies, timelines, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a good question, Scott. I mean,
just jump right in.
Yeah, he went for the throat.
There's so many.
No, I went for the topic that Joel.
Yeah, I know. That's true. I wanted this topic, so let's do it.
Okay, guys. So look, back about 8 to 9 months ago, whether it was TikTok or whether it was YouTube, everybody was talking about, is this the sign of Jonah? We're having a solar eclipse. Is it the sign of Jonah? Is sign of Jonah, sign of Jonah? And like everybody was talking about this. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as the solar eclipse, April 8th, 2024 came and went, it's like, oh, okay, guys, back to the regular grind. Let's talk about celebrities. Let's talk about this gossip. Let's talk about politics and this and this and this. And what I did, again, it's just something I put it out there for free, guys. Bible Prophecy Secrets 2. I talk about, hey, the main thing that I see right now, there's points of intersection. Okay, you guys all know this is the Hebrew letter Aleph. This is the Hebrew letter Aleph. There's an intersection of the total solar eclipses. Well, the 2023 is a partial, but you get my point. The paths of totality crossed over the Cascadia subduction zone. They crossed over the New Madrid seismic zone. And what a lot of people don't talk about is right here in Texas, there's what's called the Balcones fault line outside of San Antonio. In fact, the whole I-35 corridor running basically through every major city of Texas is on a fault line. And so I was like, wait a minute. And then you look at the historical patterns of eclipses, the 1811 New Madrid earthquakes. Okay, it started in December of 1811. There was a 7.0 and a 7.5 on the same day, and then you had a 7.0 and another 7.0. Well, all those earthquakes, the hundreds of aftershocks, they even said that Mississippi flowed backwards. All those things commenced, but not without a warning sign. And it was actually 2 solar eclipses that made a cross right over the New Madrid in the 1800s. 1806 and 1811 were the 2. It was a 5-year cycle, and they crossed over the New Madrid. But I have more cycles than that. So I've studied a lot of cycles because you guys know the way that God works, the way the Hebrew works is things are very cyclical. So even if you look at something that's been fulfilled in the past, like Hosea chapter 5, a new moon is going to devour you, Ephraim, Israel. Well, when Israel was conquered, something apparently happened on a new moon. Maybe we should be watching out for a new moon over the United States, over end times Israel. Maybe we should be looking for, cyclical ways of looking at the Bible. And that's exactly what I have discovered. So what I'm seeing, one of the first major things in 2025, earthquakes, big ones. I'm talking 7.0 and up. And we recently saw one in California. I did a video about this on Overcome Babylon, the YouTube channel. We did 7.0 right outside of Cape Mendocino, California. That was on December 5th, I think it was, but I'm a little rusty on that. Maybe it's 5th or 6th, but it was a big one. And it even shook, homes. I mean, it was big, but it didn't have quite the structure to cause a tsunami, to cause bigger devastation. But so Cape Mendocino right there is the southernmost tip of the Cascadia subduction zone, which again, that's where that intersection was of the 2023 and 2017 solar eclipses. And so the intersections are the places that matter. So thoughts on that, guys? I'd love to see what you guys think about all that so far. Have you heard about these things? I know people have covered it, but I've made a point to really be very specific. We should be looking for these things.
I'm just glad it's going to happen in Texas. So looks like Colorado has left off This is good. This is good news, guys. This means we can ski until the apocalypse. Come on. Look on the bright side here. You,
I have never been an earthquake studier, but again, from a standpoint of that is certainly going to be one of the signs as far as when we're approaching then, which I believe they are, then that should be one of the signs is there's going to be earthquakes in diverse places. A little earthquake in California or whatever is not a big deal, but you start seeing earthquakes in places that, at least during my lifetime, we haven't seen. I can see how that would certainly be Yah's way of trying to wake up his people, get people to repent. And so, that earthquakes has not been my forte, though, Abraham. So when I'm ignorant on something, I would just go, yeah, I'm pretty ignorant on it.
Okay, so when I was writing my book back in 2010, I was writing about the New Madrid fault line blowing up, and basically I was trying to pattern it after 1811, 1812. And so I was just praying every morning, hey, God, if you've got anything interesting for me, throw it at me, get it to me. And so my next door neighbor and I did not talk very much, but he happened to wander over as I was typing on my book. And he said, hey, I want to show you my book. And I said, what's this? He said, it's about fault lines. And he said, I think you need to be aware of this. I don't know why, but I think you need to be aware of it, that there's the mid-continent fault line that goes across America. Basically, it follows the point that Abraham just listed, basically close to I-80, all the way across to New Jersey. And if that blew at the same time as the New Madrid fault line, it would form a water cross across America. Okay, where the Lake Michigan, other Great Lakes would drain out into the New Madrid area, and then it would also fill east-west across the mid-continent fault line. And so that was kind of cool. I mean, that would be a sign from God, wouldn't it be? And if we divide Israel at some point in time, it seems like the earthquakes are going to happen, and we will be divided also. So throw it back to you, Abraham.
Yeah. One cycle I would like to touch on too, because it took a lot of digging to find this one. Let me tell you. You go to a historical eclipse cycle over the United States before the United States is even officially a country, right? 1694 to 1701. You have two annular solar eclipses, and the 1694 one went right through Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which was the capital of the Cherokee Nation. It wasn't at that time, but they eventually migrated westward, and an ancient Ketua or Cherokee prophecy was actually fulfilled. And that solar eclipse preceded the fulfillment of the prophecy that was received amongst the natives, which they believed in Yahweh. That's how they referred to Yahweh or Yehovah. Yahweh. They said if they fell away from their traditions, because apparently they had very Hebrew traditions too. I've looked into it, and I've had a buddy of mine, Jeff Pletcher, on the Overcome Babylon podcast. He's broken out a lot of these things. But if they fell away, they would be subject to Elohim's judgment. Well, that's exactly what happened. Trail of Tears, right? Happened later in the 1800s. But before all that happened, there was a solar eclipse that went right through Tahlequah, and it exited the country. So from south to east to northeast, exited right over Washington, D.C. So that's 1694. You had an annular solar eclipse. Then, 7 years later. No, what is that? Yeah, 7 years later. 7, right? 2017 to 2024. That was a 7. Ancient Assyria, 770 BC to 763. That was a 7-year cycle. There's another one coming up. Maybe we can talk about that more. There's going to be another solar eclipse crossover Egypt, end times Egypt, which is very relevant for Isaiah chapter 19, the fulfillment of Isaiah 19. But going back to 1694, 1701, you have this solar eclipse cycle. They don't cross. They don't intersect anywhere. One of them, like I said, Tahlequah, Oklahoma to Washington, D.C. Then in 1701, there was the a Cascadia subduction zone solar eclipse. It was this annular solar eclipse. It happened on, I believe it was February. I don't have the exact date, but it was 1701. Now, here's what happened back in those days. Talking about earthquakes, talking about seismology, researchers, because of the coastal sedimentary records over there on the coast, Pacific Northwest, they have been able to determine, okay, these are the records. This is what it looked like. We have oral traditions we have from the Native Americans, but we also have records and documents from the Japanese at that time that there was in fact a megathrust earthquake. It was the 1700 megathrust earthquake, and it happened on January 26th, 1700. That was a 9.0, guys. That's their estimate, 9.0. We're talking about tsunami waves 85 to 100 feet tall. the entire Pacific Northwest as we know it would be inundated. It would take maybe take maybe years, months, I don't know, for the water to recede back into the ocean. But here's the thing, that earthquake happened, the big one, they call it the big one, the mega thrust, 9-pointer. The tsunami was so powerful, it didn't just hit the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, it went all the way to Japan a day later. And every single village that was not above, at least 50 feet above sea level on the Japan. Think about how far that is, man. If you guys have flown from, I don't know, from LA to Hawaii, or if you've gone across the pond, in that direction, it's a long ways, but 50 feet, apparently it was at least 50-foot waves hit Japan in those days. Now, remember, there's a solar eclipse. We're talking about a specific period of time, 1694 to 1701. So you had that megathrust earthquake, 9-pointer. Before that, exactly 30 days before that, you had a Christmas Day earthquake in the New Madrid, which French missionaries were like, wow, this is really big. The Native Americans also wrote about it. It was a big one in New Madrid, the seismic zone there. Obviously, I've been talking about it, but it's right there in Missouri, but it really hits all those states, Tennessee, Arkansas, all those states get affected, and even up to upstate New York can be affected because of how massive when the New Madrid goes off, it's massive. And so that happened 30 days later. Then you have the megathrust and the Cascadia. So these things are very connected, if that makes sense.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of detail. Okay. So kind of bring it home for us. What do you potentially see happening in 2025 or 6 or 7? I mean, we don't have to stay right on that year, but I mean, what are the implications for us? Kind of spoon feed me here, because you've done a lot of research, and I'm trying to follow what are the implications for us.
So
aside from
in order to, we always talk about this, we hear about this all the time, right? Especially you guys are teachers, you're the same way. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I say that all the time. It's, we all do as teachers. So the main thing to do is to go back to ancient Assyria. And so what you'll do is in the Gospels, specifically Matthew, he does the best job. At the beginning of Christ's ministry, the Pharisees come up and they're like, hey, show us a sign. And Jesus is like, no, you're not going to get a sign. And then later on, like several chapters, I forget the exact chapters, but you have it early in Matthew and later, like chapter 16, if I'm not mistaken, the Pharisees ask him for a sign again later. And he's like, but they ask for a sign from heaven. And so Jesus is like, you guys know when the weather is, fair, when it's fair, when it's threatening and dark, when it's threatening and dark, a storm is coming. It's going to be bad weather today. And he calls them hypocrites. And he says, a crooked and perverse generation seeks after a sign, but no sign shall be given to it except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. And so by implication, there's two implications. Number one, the sign of Jonah appears to every crooked and adulterous generation at some point. And I've demonstrated that through my research. The fall of nations, the rise and fall of empires from Babylon, indeed, yes, indeed, guys, all the way from Babylon, there's an eclipse cycle there, all the way to now, the rise and fall of empires has been accompanied by the sign of Jonah in different ways. And so with ancient Assyria, the second implication of what Yeshua said is it's celestial. That's simply, show us a sign from heaven, celestial. So number one, any crooked generation gets it. Number two, celestial in nature. That's what we should be looking for, just looking at Yeshua's words. And so when you go back, you go to NASA, Eclipse Info, Eclipse Wise, you look at Espenak and all their records. You go to the 700s BC. The reason we pin the date of the 700s BC for the actual sign of Jonah that Christ was talking about is because specifically in Kings, I believe it's 2 Kings chapter 14. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it specifically says that Jonah, son of Amittai, was a prophet during the reign of Jeroboam II. And we know exactly when that date is because we're able to do that. You can look at Galil, Kitchen. You can look at the different, historians and chronologists, and we can see, okay, we know when that is. That's the first clue. The second clue is in the different, what do they call it?
Before you get there, I really want to ask, we generally think of the sign of Jonah as him being swallowed by a fish, 3 days, coming back. So the way I've understood the sign of Jonah in relation to Jesus is he's saying, you guys won't get anything except for my burial and resurrection. It sounds like you're suggesting that it's some kind of a heavenly sign in the sky that they're actually, that they understood. Is that what you're
and I would say it could be both and, Doug. Quite often it is. It could have been something
but why would the Pharisees have really thought about something in the sky? I mean,
because they would have known scripture probably better than we do, that the sun, moon, and stars were created for signs and for appointed times. Whereas, again, in our upbringing, a sign might have been, it's viewed as maybe a miracle. And he was doing miracles left and right, as if that wasn't good enough evidence for them. Just the miracles he did. I've been going through on the Hanukkah issue lately, and it's like, tell us if you're Messiah. And it's like, I've told you. Not only had he told him, he had demonstrated. He was healing the sick. He was opening the eyes of the blind. You see in his ministry all these signs, these miracles. But I think it is both and. And we just, again, in Christianity, we're not taught to think like that. We're not taught to link the signs back to, well, what would have been a sign to the ancient Israelites? And so I can see where it is a both and it certainly was a sign when he resurrected, although they still rejected him.
Okay.
So.
Doug, we've seen it with Babylon. I went back in April 8th time frame, the eclipse time frame, and I looked at it, and Babylon had those signs. They were, I think, 5 or 7 year signs, but there were the eclipses, and judgment seemed to pour out during those time frames. Then also with Nineveh, it was the same situation. You saw those eclipses. So I agree with Scott. It seems like both, they would have just associated both.
Abraham, I'll put this up for you. I mean, I have read, probably hundreds of times in my lifetime through the Babylon passages and studying them. And I've never really thought until you just brought it up, an earthquake that would do this, either in the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico. I can see how an earthquake even in the Great Lakes could take out cities that are on the seaboard, or how, I don't know how far inland. I don't know how large a tsunami could get in the Great Lakes, but those are very, very large bodies of water. And I've never been in the Great Lakes, but I would assume the waves can get quite high just from a normal storm. So again, without it being nuclear weapons set off or whatever that might create a tsunami. And I can see how even Yah could use the nations, for judgment on America or other nations, where they might decide, well, we're going to set off a nuclear weapon along this fault line to try to create a bigger tsunami from an earthquake. So there's all kinds of possibilities and theories running through my head. What are your thoughts on this particular passage?
Yeah. So when I was doing I dedicated 12 to 13 hours to the April 8th eclipse before I even knew it was a thing, guys. I didn't even know people were going to be that interested in it. I started covering it in like December, January, December 2023, January, or earlier this year. And one of the videos that I did, there's a place called La Palma. I believe it's owned by the Spanish or the Portuguese. I just can't remember off the top of my head right now. La Palma has a specific volcano on it that if it erupts,
La Cumbre Vieja. Yeah.
Cumbre Vieja, that's right. If that thing erupts, it's supposed to cause a tsunami to hit the East Coast as well.
Oh, we're dead. If that thing goes off, that thing's going to go 500 miles an hour. It's going to be like 100 feet tall. And and it's crazy. I know. I did research on that years ago. It's really nuts. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Doug, exactly. And when you look at the Bible codes for that, like I'm not a huge Bible code guy, but we came across some information when we were putting together that live stream back then. If you look at the Bible codes, it actually says and indicates that Putin might be involved with the detonation of a warhead at that location just to inundate the East Coast.
Now that's interesting. Wow. That's a twist right there. Yeah, because that whole thing, like, I think it was like somebody, I don't know, scientist, something or other, Jonathan Day or something like that. he talks about how basically there's a bunch of water that's in the fissures of the rock on that island. And so if you have a nuclear blast could certainly do that, but also if you have an eruption, then it would make all that water boil, which would then basically pop the top off the island. It would then come rushing down. It would drop 700 feet into the water, which would then create a tsunami wave traveling 500 miles per hour over to the east coast of the Americas. And I mean, the wave would be just crazy tall. And, it's not only the initial wave, but then it's, of course, all the flooding that would come in after that, the flood surge, I mean, it would do a tremendous amount of damage. And of course, that's where a lot of people live, right? That's where a lot of the population tends to live.
Wasn't that in the news a few years ago about a possible eruption? Don't I remember that? Because I heard, or at least I heard in prophecy circles.
They've been talking about it. They're saying that it's way overdue. It's like, 150,000 years overdue or whatever.
Well, and let's be honest, when we start looking at the United States of America and the left coast and the east coast, that is where evil just loves to live. I'm not saying we don't have a lot of evil people here in Alabama, but comparatively speaking to the East Coast and the West Coast, they're the ones that are wanting to support little kids changing from pretending that they can change from a boy to a girl. All of this, no doubt, 100% abominations, evil in the eyes of Yah, and I can see how Yah will judge America, but he could even do it selectively based on region and location, as opposed to simply judging the entire landmass, which is a very, very large landmass. Not trying to say that any state is righteous, but there are certainly pockets in America that follow Christian, biblical, Judeo-Christian morals and beliefs a lot more than other pockets. So I could even see how certain cities could get wiped out, one way or the other. Because cities are cesspools.
Okay, so Abraham, do you think that based on the 2017, 2023, 2024, these odd little solar eclipses, that there's a pattern there and that it's setting up for something that's prophetic?
That's a great question, Joel. So the reason I brought up the La Palma, the eruption there, is because the 2024 solar eclipse, the path actually ended over there. So they actually saw it. It wasn't obviously a full eclipse like what we would see here in the United States, but they actually got touched. The westernmost part of Europe got touched by the April 8th, 2024 eclipse. And so it appears that the omen reached La Palma, basically. But yeah, going to your question, Joel, I guess we kind of have to still backtrack a little bit to ancient Assyria to understand the pattern, to understand the cyclical nature of these things. Again, so I was kind of pinpointing the ancient sign of Jonah. And again, Doug, I know you're kind of like, wait, is this for real? Like, is this legit? A sign in heaven? It
is, Doug.
What I do whenever I have a question like that, it's a hypothesis. Okay, right. I think this may or may not be true. Let me go see what I find. I didn't go into it with a bias, of course. I just hey, let me see what it is, because everybody's saying the sign of Jonah has something to do with the solar eclipse. Let's just see what it is. And what I found is that just like America's 7-year triple eclipse, Assyria had a 7-year triple eclipse. And this is what most people don't talk about. I don't know why. After everybody, let's face it, guys, everybody's making money off the YouTube algorithm, getting the pump up the views and all that kind of stuff. And that's their business. But they kind of dropped the ball, is what I'm saying. Like all the big YouTubers, everybody who would cover it, they kind of dropped the ball, and no one figured it out that it's actually a cycle of 7 years, roughly, with 3 solar eclipses. So in 770 BC, we start this whole thing off, the judgment of Nineveh, with it's a total solar eclipse. Okay, Americas began with a total solar eclipse in 2017. That went through the southernmost extremity of the Assyrian Empire. That's key. It went through the southernmost extremity. It would have been highly visible in Iran, Elam, modern day, of course, but highly visible to the Assyrian Empire and their territories, because this was the Neo-Assyrian period. This is when they were dominant. They were the powerhouse in those days. They were an endless war. Kind of sounds familiar, right? They're always at war with their neighbors. There was a lot of resentment, but no one could do anything about it because Assyria was a dominant superpower. It was the Neo-Assyrian period. So you have 770 BC. Then just a few years later, 765 BC. This one is critical. What most people would fail to realize is that to the ancient Assyrians, according to books like I'm trying to think, Jean Bottero, different Assyriologists, they'll tell you, if you dig for it, for the Assyrians to see a solar eclipse, even if it's partial, it was a sign of serious danger. And what they would actually do is they would have a ritual called the substitute king, which is called the Sarpuhi. And they would actually substitute a fake king during the period of the solar eclipse just to make sure that the real king didn't die. So to say that this was like, no big deal, inconsequential, no, it was a really big deal to ancient Assyria. They understood that it means something. These solar eclipses mean something. So in 765, you have a solar eclipse that traveled through the Mediterranean. And it went through Athens, Greece. It went through Istanbul, what would become Istanbul, Turkey. And Constantinople, I believe it went through at that time. But even that eclipse, because it was total, even though it was in the Mediterranean, it would have been like 70 or 80% visible to Nineveh, the capital of ancient Assyria. So again, we have 770, we have 765, and then we have the grand finale to complete the 7-year cycle of judgment to Nineveh. 763 is when you have a eclipse go pretty much right through ancient Nineveh. And that's the one that people talked about a lot on the internet, on the interwebs, right? But it wasn't that wasn't technically the sign of Jonah. It was a cycle. God doesn't just judge right away, right? He gives people warnings. He tells them to repent. So he gives people time. And so relaying that to today, so the eclipses over America from 2017 to 2024, it began with a total, ended with a total. Assyria began with a total eclipse, 770, ended with a total eclipse in 763. Guys, you cannot make this stuff up. I've mapped it out. I've charted it out.
When do you believe Jonah was sent to Assyria? What year?
So because of the language used in the passage of immediately, okay, so we know that the king, which is Ashur-dan III, I pin it to the king. You can, with proper study of the time frame, you see his behavior. Consecrate a fast. Don't taste anything. Not even the beasts are going to eat today, guys. No water, nothing. Consecrated a fast. And what did Jonah do? What literally would be normally 5 days later, he went to build a sukkah, right?
Sure.
So this is key to the time frame. He went to build a sukkah. That's what it tells us in Jonah chapter 3 or 4. I can't remember. I think it's 4. And then he went under the shade of a plant, and he waited to see what would happen in Nineveh. But he built a sukkah. It didn't use the word ohel in the Masoretic Hebrew text. If it would have said ohel, I would have been like, oh, when Jonah was vomited onto dry land, he brought a tent with him somehow. But it used the word sukkah. So he built a sukkah 5 days after the Day of Atonement. So I pin this to what we would call the Hebrew winter time frame, which we would call North American fall time frame, right?
So
September. So the year for that would be 763 BC. So here's the key, right? Nineveh saw the total solar eclipse 763 BC, but God waited until, and I pin this using TorahCalendar.com. You go and see the new moons for that year. You go and see the cycle. You're looking at a September Sukkot and Day of Atonement right there. And Jonah was telling them 40 days from now, you're going to be judged, which was November of 763 BC. And so it was the winter, Hebrew winter. So we're in the Hebrew winter right now. And this should basically scare the hell out of anybody who's listening, who understands the gravity of cycles, solar eclipses, the sign of Jonah. Yeah.
Making another connection to the 40, again, and sometimes there is a day for a year principle in scripture, and a lot of times that is a very valid thing. What happened to the house of Judah, to Jerusalem, for what I believe would be 40 years after Yeshua returned and ascended to his place? Judah was judged. And so you can make a very good argument. I don't think I could prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that it was 40 years. I believe that makes way too much biblical sense with all the 40s, and 40 being a number used for judgment. 40 years in the wilderness, the 40 days and 40 nights, et cetera, et cetera. You've got all these. Have you ever thought about that, Abraham, as far as how Judah was actually judged after Yeshua was crucified, resurrected, ascended?
Yeah, that's a new connection. I haven't thought about it. Yeah.
I mean, they were judged. I mean, not a stone was left unturned. And, ever since then, Yah's been using Islam almost to put a thumb in Judah's eye now, even to this day, as far as look what I did back in 70 AD. And go ahead,
Doug, to prove it to you, I think it's Joel Kramer from Expedition Bible found a stele from Nineveh that talks about which king was present and when this thing occurred. And so it's recorded. It's like their stele of wars, and so they document this odd pattern that Abraham's talking about. It's just very interesting that it's well documented, and it matches up with the Bible perfectly. So it's a good video. I'll try to find it.
That's very cool.
So you think judgment could be coming, Abraham?
It's only a matter of when, not if, of course. It's just I have my finger on the pulse for this winter. I made a big deal about last winter for different reasons, but this time I'm just seeing those earthquakes, man. I'm seeing those natural disasters. I believe it ties directly into Amos chapter 8, because when you look at Amos chapter 8, it specifically says, I'm going to make the sun dark at noon. Well, okay, that didn't fit the criteria of 2017. That didn't fit the criteria of 2023, but it fit the criteria. As soon as the total solar eclipse passed over Texas, Eagle Pass, Texas, it was 12:02 or 12:03 p.m. local time. And I looked at Amos 8 and I'm like, you can't make this stuff up. And what does it say immediately after that verse? And I don't have it pulled up, but Amos chapter 8, immediately after that, it says, I will turn your feast days into mourning. What do we have coming up? We have Christmas, Easter, Christmas and Hanukkah, sorry.
And they happen
and New Year's.
They happen to coincide this year, and that would be the two harlot sisters, Judah and her holy days, and the house of Israel, aka Christianity's, and her festivals. These are not his festival. These are the two harlot sisters rolling around in the bed. We just happen to have different festivals. And I say we, I don't, I no longer roll around in the bed on those festivals, either one of them.
Yeah, and I had mentioned this earlier. Hosea chapter 5, verse 7. I pulled it up just to make sure I got it right. When ancient Ephraim, northern house Israel, was judged, God said, a new moon shall devour them in their heritage. So if ancient Ephraim, Israel, was judged on a new moon, guess what is also happening right on New Year's? A new moon, guys. So feast days into mourning, Hosea chapter 5. Everything is connecting to me. I'm not saying it's going to happen in January 1st, okay? But we should be expecting it. We should be preparing for it because, sorry?
I was just going to say, shameless plug, everybody. Myself and Steve Mutry recorded something. I never recorded it before, but I promised him I would wait till he put it out on his channel. But I will have it up on mine in the next day or two, where we're actually discussing this topic. And if anybody's ever watched Steve and listened to Steve teaching, he is a date watcher, not a date setter. This would be this coming Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, the beginning of when our brother Judah starts to do their festival, their religious holy holiday festival happens to coincide. And so Steve's looking at that. And to your point, Abraham, the New Year's, in other words, the pagan, Gregorian, Roman New Year. And so, again, not saying anything's going to happen, but just everybody watch that. And if something does happen, it's not a prophecy. I have not received a dream or a vision or anything. I'm just starting to really watch certain dates historically And it's based on biblical dates like Haggai, and that would be the 24th day of the 9th month in Haggai 2, and things of that nature. So again, I don't think we're going to see certain events fulfilled until an actual Moedim. In other words, I like to call them, Abraham, the Feast of Jesus now to my Christian friends. And they go, what are you talking about, the Feast of Jesus? I'm like, oh, didn't he create these Moedim, these appointed time, these feasts on day 4? Is he the creator God or not? And so it kind of, when you call them the Feast of Jesus, you kind of get people, you get people starting to ask that question, like, what in the heck are you talking about? Those are the Jewish feasts, and so, but I do believe those dates that prophets received the word of Yah, those specific dates that have happened in history, through Judah's history, through the house of Israel's history, maybe historically, or when the prophet was given a certain prophecy. Pay attention to that as I believe events unfold. Pay attention to when things happened in the past, because as Abraham pointed out earlier, prophecy is cyclical. And that's why none of the Christian systems of preterism, historicism, or futurism make sense, because they're trying to plug it into one or the other. And the answer is to all three is yes. It is preterism, it is historicism, which is historical pattern, and there will be a future final fulfillment. And so, and then you can read your scriptures and not bang your head against the wall and go, but this was fulfilled, or but this certainly wasn't. And then you're trying to put Isaiah 51, these passages, and you go, well, that, no doubt Babylon got judged, but there's a lot of that prophecy that you go, this has not been fulfilled yet. And so I believe as more and more people start to have this Hebraic understanding of prophecy, that even the historical accounts, that I don't like to call them stories, that are recorded in the Torah, specific dates that occur in the Torah, it won't necessarily be fulfilled exactly that way again, but those historical accounts are also the purest forms of prophecy. And I think that's what more and more people are starting to have ears to hear and eyes to see as they're learning prophecy. We're unlearning these three systems, and I would say we're taking what is true about each system, but then when you merge them together and you have this Genesis to Revelation biblical view of Scripture, as opposed to trying to separate out the testaments, then prophecy starts to make sense.
So, Abraham, are you familiar with Amos 1 at all? Basically related to Syria, and here's why. Many of the locations, like Damascus, are listed in Amos 1. And so I was listening to a video today, and they were citing, Damascus is cited, and some of the other cities are cited, and it seems like, that region will fall. And it seems like it's related to today, but I don't remember my history well enough to figure out how and when those places fell and what time frame and things like that, or if they never did. I mean, like Damascus has never fallen, and we're always watching for that. That's Isaiah 17:1. But basically, do you think that there's something prophetic about Syria falling as fast as it did, exactly when it did, and how do you feel about it?
This is a great question. I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on this too. Let's go to Isaiah 17. I'm going to take a look at it real quick, because I recently came across some kind of interesting facts about this, because people have been talking about it, obviously. So it says, behold, Damascus will cease from being a city. It will be a ruinous heap. When I've studied this in the past, and what I'm noticing is people neglect what comes after that, right? It says, in that day, it'll come to pass, and this is verse 4, that the glory of Jacob will wane, and the fatness of his flesh grow lean. And it talks about, basically talks about end times Israel being judged. Now,
Abraham, you skipped verse 3. The fortress.
Yeah, the fortress
Also shall cease from Ephraim. And who is currently has the greatest armed forces in the entire world, in military bases all over the world? It's the United States of America. I mean, and so again, I look at this as sort of, it's not going to be good for Ephraim. And I do believe that America fits the picture of Ephraim. It is a multitude of nations. It is a melting pot of people from all over the world that have come here. And in spite of how Babylonian, pure pagan and evil this nation has gotten, there is still a large part of the nation that would certainly fit the bill for the house of Israel. They believe in, they have the testimony of Yeshua. They've been taught love your neighbor, love others. The gospel has went out from America. There's been many great things about this country, but we fit, I believe, what would be called end times Ephraim, simply because we are a multitude of nations. And you could even make a good argument that now with Britain and other European Western countries opening up borders, that they would fit that bill more. Whereas you go to certain countries, Asia, Africa, things of that nature, they are not such a melting pot. They are still more, homogenous comparatively speaking to Europe and America. So, and Canada and Australia. And so, again, don't like to do a DNA thing, but I don't think there's any doubt that the Western nations have had that firstborn blessing. They have been more fruitful than those in Africa, South America, and Asia until very recently. So you just see all these patterns, and when you start to look at prophecy, and you see House of Israel or you see Ephraim, pay attention, everybody. Don't just think, because there's no such country called Ephraim right now. Everybody's like, well, it has to be it. But the Bible is not about America. The Bible is not about China or South America. It's only about these lands, ancient lands surrounding. Well, where in the heck? There's no country called Ephraim.
The West Bank is kind of that, isn't it?
What now?
The West
Isn't
Bank.
it Britain?
No, that would be the location.
No, not Britain.
But there is no country right now called Ephraim.
Yeah.
There would be a geographical location, but Ephraim was swallowed up by the nations, and we're still in exile. We live in Babylon to the point of Abraham's channel. We're to overcome Babylon and eventually get out of here one way or the other. So.
Yeah, that's you pretty much see Ephraim in a very similar way than that I do, Scott. The only difference is I see Ephraim. Let me backtrack. Jacob, obviously, when he had Reuben was the firstborn. Reuben, he was the firstborn blessing recipient, but because he slept with Jacob's concubine, he forfeited it. And then it was passed on to the firstborn of Rachel. Of course, this is Joseph, but then he was split into Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim came first, and then Manasseh. So the way I see it is you have France, Reuben, the beginning of his strength, Genesis chapter 49, that's what it says. So I see France came first. Napoleon Bonaparte was the peak of French power, really. Tons of different constitutions after that, a lot of instability. And so that's what I see. Then you see Ephraim, you have the UK taking up that mantle, being the multitude of nations, thousands of a multitude of nations, whereas Manasseh, the very last firstborn recipient, he's just thousands, whereas Ephraim was 10,000s. So I see Manasseh as America, but that adds to the whole dynamic, because whether you want to call him Ephraim, Joseph, or Manasseh, it's really synonymous in prophecy in a lot of places. And this is a good case in point. Isaiah 17, we're looking at Ephraim, the fortress, falling from, the Anglo-American establishment. Well, that sounds like earthquakes. That sounds like natural disasters, because really it looks like nothing is going to put an end or put a stop to American imperialism, American colonialism worldwide. Whether you love American capitalism or hate it, that's really not what I'm bringing up. I'm just saying, they're dominating the Middle East. They're exploiting the natural resources. We're sending our guys overseas to fight wars under false pretense, and we're doing all kinds of things to exploit resources. That's just a fact. And so what's going to put an end to it? I believe we're going to see those earthquakes, and so that leads to somewhere in the mix, the fall of Damascus. And then somewhere in the mix, you see the scattered Israelites worldwide, but especially they're the big time powerhouse nations of the G7 of the West. You see them falling.
Do you see ISIS growing in power and scope?
Well, what is ISIS, right? It's an American proxy.
Oh, it is. I mean, it seemed to grow during some of these times. So yeah, go there.
Same with, I forget the name of the acronym because it's so new, but the HTS or whatever it is that's running Syria.
Yeah. Right.
that's an American proxy as well, funded and armed by the Americans. And again, these radical groups, we're responsible. We have a lot of blood on our hands as a nation, but we do it to overthrow, to destabilize, and to take resources. In this case, there's a lot of rumors and speculation about a natural gas pipeline going all the way from, obviously, the Middle East through Turkey to the EU, so to reduce Russian dependence on natural gas flows. So that makes a lot of sense. You want Damascus to fall. You want to, arm and fund radical groups to go ahead and do this kind of a thing. Again, that's just my opinion, but that's obviously when you connect the dots, you see these kinds of things taking place. So that's all American imperialism on full display, right?
Yeah, I personally, I don't know what you stand on this, but I don't think that Damascus has actually fallen. I mean, it says it's going to be a ruinous heap. I just don't. I tend to take it a bit more literally. I don't think that it really qualifies as a ruinous heap. We had the overthrow of a dictatorship that had been in power for decades, and it may get worse, in fact, with whoever comes in next. We don't know. Hopefully, I hope they have a lot of golden years ahead of them. But, when you have a power vacuum, it can certainly lead to even worse guys being in than the guy they had before, which is pretty crazy. But, I don't know. I tend to take those just a bit more literally. I think a nuclear, what I suggest in Regenesis Code is, well, my co-author Mornay suggested. It was his great idea. But basically, a dirty bomb could take out Damascus. So it could be very limited in scope. Certainly, the blame could be put on the modern state of Israel. Not to disagree with anything we were saying about Ephraim's role in this whole thing. But, I do think that Judah is going to incur some hatred as we get into the last days, even more than we've ever seen. And I don't know, we're in very interesting times. I mean, Scott, I think you make a great point about, Ephraim. There's no country called Ephraim. And even though I want to be very careful about saying that America's Ephraim, I would say that we're part of Ephraim, and we're probably the strongest part of Ephraim if we had to kind of take a stab at it. It's people are waking up too. This is what we get kind of excited about, is that people are waking up, like the four of us here. We're waking up to the fact that we are part of Ephraim, the house of Israel. We haven't replaced the Jews. We're joining them, albeit slowly, but we're joining them, and they're to some degree joining us. God is putting these two houses back together. We even see this in Isaiah chapter 11, where it says that he's going to gather his elect out of the four corners of the earth, right? Exactly what Jesus said. And he says, then Judah will not harass Ephraim, and Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah anymore. I mean, we clearly have that going on. That's been happening for, hundreds of years, basically, where, the church, aka Ephraim, unbeknownst to many of them, were very hateful toward the Jewish people. I mean, just look at the last couple thousand years, and I think you guys will know that there's been a lot of hatred. And of course, Judah has been, to some degree, and for good reason, distrustful of Ephraim. And so all of that is going to be finally resolved when the Lord comes back. And so, the only way we can have any sense of Ephraim, of these passages, is that Ephraim has to be out there somewhere. And, turns out that we looked in the mirror like, oh, there we are, so that's kind of cool, and so it certainly opens up a lot of possibilities for prophecy, but it also kind of muddies the waters to some degree, because now we're like, well, okay, who are the players? So I don't know, we're in crazy.
Let's talk about the players. So in Ezekiel 38:39, we have players, and two of them don't seem to play well together. They're Sunni and Shiite. So the Sunni side would be more Turkey and Syria and those areas right now that we're dealing with. And then the other side is the Shiite side, which is Iran, Persia. They're part of it too. And right now they don't talk to each other. They hate each other, but at some point in time they seem to come together and then fight against Israel. Abraham, how do you see that coming together?
That's really good, brother. To add to your point, Doug, I agree. I'm looking for physical destruction of Damascus, and it makes even more sense now, because, of course, if it's under Anglo-American Israeli occupation, even more reason for a specific prophecy that has to do with Persia, to add to your point, Joel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a very specific prophecy to unfold. It's Isaiah chapter 22. I haven't really looked at a whole lot of commentaries on it because I don't know. It was really obvious to me what it was talking about when I was studying it. But I'm looking for Persia to play a pretty big role. But before we talk about that, I guess
cool.
BRICS, one thing that I talk about a lot on my channel is the BRICS nations. It was the BRICS, just the Brazil, India, China, South Africa. It was just them for a while. And something happened in 2023. And to this day, it was the biggest YouTube video I ever did. I think it's because it was accurate in a strange way. Obviously, I never say thus says the Lord. I'm not presumptuous. But I said, hey, guys, BRICS is going to join and become the BRICS 10 of Revelation chapter 17 to take down the West beginning August 2023. And that ended up being correct because the last annual BRICS summit, not the one this year, but the one prior, you had the formation of, okay, now Saudi Arabia is getting in there. Now you have all these players getting in there. Obviously, Persia. You have all basically the exact nations that are being spoken of in Ezekiel 38, 39 are in the BRICS.
You've got East versus West. I mean, you've got
you do.
If we look at it from a Christian historical standpoint, too, everybody, Mama Rome is not happy right now with the Russian Orthodox Church. I mean, I believe we've seen sort of a renewal of that rivalry coming to fruition, and again, at the upper echelons of these occultists, I think they know they're all on the same team. Others just maybe play their role, but I see this just all playing out as however it ends up playing out, this political intrigue and a lot of the puppets not even realizing who's really pulling their strings. We know it's the powers and the principalities and the heavenlies that are the real puppet masters, and the humans on this earth are just the puppets. But this East-West thing, this great schism, even between the Orthodox Christianity and Roman Christianity, I think you see that right now playing out between America, who would be, I believe, is the military arm of Rome, and you've still got Russia, and they're forming these alliances with the Shias, and so you have this East versus West. So you have like Sunni. You have some Sunnis in with the West, but I can see most of Islam aligning with this Eastern BRICS alignment, not just the Joel Richardson view or some that have a view that it's just about Islam, but it also would include these other nations and countries such as Russia, China, etc. So that's possible. In other words, I'm like you, Abraham. I'm not a thus saith the Lord. I'm just watching things unfold, and it is interesting that BRICS went to 10. Joel has an interesting theory on technocracy and how these 10 kings, maybe somebody like a Bill Gates, an Elon Musk, which I don't think he called all of his companies X, that has occultic symbols, the number 10, the Roman number 10. Again, guys, he's not picking these things for no reason. We're not seeing Neuralink coming about. We're not seeing him and Trump and Abraham, Doug, if you've got time, Abraham's not as bold as our guest Maria on the Donald and the Orange Man, but he has some pretty strong opinions on DJT. So, and I can't say that he's wrong. What's your thoughts about the president-elect, Abraham?
Yeah.
We might have some Trump sniffers on here that need to hear what your understanding is.
Okay, before I say anything, I voted for him twice, read his books. In fact, do I still have him here on my desk? I have books of his right here. Anyways, I was really big into his work, absolutely followed him big time. So to say that I'm just a Trump hater or this and that, it's just total nonsense. So I voted for him twice. 2016, 2020, fool me once, fool me twice. You're not going to fool me 3 times, but I did a 3-part series on Trump actually for the YouTube channel. I investigated what his true religious ideology is, because everybody and their mother wants to say, oh, he's such a Christian man. Oh, he's so blessed, brother. Didn't you see Brandon Biggs' ear prophecy when Trump, got shot in the ear And Brandon Biggs predicted it. And Brandon Biggs also said that Trump is just this radically born again Christian man. And so I hit that really hard, guys, because there are a lot of people coming up and having dreams and saying things, and they're not 100% true, but they are saying thus says the Lord. And they're saying this is straight from God, man. This is God's word to you guys. And they're saying he's a Christian. He's going to, he's going to restore the country. We're going to have this golden age. It's going to be so amazing. And meanwhile, you have basically his, first dude of the White House, first man, or however you want to refer to him, Elon Musk, making the biggest AI data center in Memphis, Tennessee. And they literally just put it live, and it's called Colossus, which, if you understand the Greek god, the Greek sun god, now you have Colossus in Tennessee, the biggest private data center for AI. Like you said at the beginning of this whole conversation, Doug, it's like, are we building Skynet here? Like, at what point are the robots and the machines and the AI and the algorithms going to launch the nukes from the silos or something crazy? Something's going to get out of hand. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what I just put up is over at where they rededicated the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and there's him and Macron giving each other the secret, spooky Freemason handshake.
Yeah.
And he sits there, with every time he sits there with his upside down, female symbol. Every time, again, the guy went to a Jesuit school, guys. I believe he has played his role probably better than anybody. And Abraham, what are your thoughts on, under the guise of conservatism, under the guise of getting out all these immigrants and everything, this digital, we need biometric ID so we can keep out these aliens. These illegals. We need biometric ID. We need a way to track people so we can get these illegals. Never let a crisis go to waste. And so what people can't see, like you were pointing out with his best buddy Elon now, and how Elon all of a sudden went from this to just like over a course of 5-6 months being the superstar for free speech and all my conservative friends love Elon now, and they love Trump, and it's like you can't say anything to these people. It's an allegiance and it's a worship by almost half the country.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%, because I post videos on TikTok, just these little 4 or 5 minute videos. And I posted one today where I have a clip of Trump saying, I never ask God for forgiveness. I don't think like that. I leave God out of that equation. He literally says that on camera. It's an old clip, but I have another one that reinforces the exact same thing. And in the comments, because I did a commentary, I'm like, guys, this is what it means to be a Christian. This is what it means to be born again. And I did a little commentary. And in the comments, people are apologizing for him. Hey, why are you judging Abraham? Why are you being so hard on Trump? He's a good.
Speak of the devil, John Barney, right here. That is bunk, Scott. John, I love you, son, sir. Whatever you are, I'm assuming you're a male, but you have been snowed and deceived so bad. And if you just take a look at the Trump Tower and all the occult symbolism on it, and take a look at his penthouse, he loves Apollo. I mean, just again, I'm not like Maria. I'm not saying that Trump is the little horn or anything like that. But if we're at the end of this age and he's going to be the president-elect of America, and that is who Yah has appointed, again, Yah has appointed him, not Satan, not a lower minion. Yah has appointed him. And maybe it's not for this golden age of America. Maybe it's not for this new dawn that the occult has been saying would happen in 2025. Maybe you should listen to Michael Flynn leading a bunch of deceived Christians in an occultic prayer said by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. I mean, when you see the people that he is surrounding himself with, when you understand the Christian nationalists and how they are in bed with Zionism, and when you understand the bigger picture of Zionism, and I'm not being anti-Judah, I'm just saying, people, take off the I love Israel glasses. God brought them there for a reason. He brought them there because all nations are going to ultimately gather against them. And they had to be in the land, but it's not like he just approves of Judah rejecting his offering of himself. And so when you start to look at this bigger picture, you're like going, oh my goodness, you know, and you're like, it's like we've all been pulled and played our entire childhoods and adulthood lives. And once you see it, you're like going, oh man, you know, and you see the programming. I love watching both sides now. I love watching Fox News for a little bit, and I love watching MSNBC, CNN, not to learn anything, but just to see how the maestros are playing that side of the board, and go over here and see it play. You know, it's like we're going to play the same tune, but we're going to change up the notes so we can manipulate this side of the people, so that left versus right, so we actually almost hate each other. You know,
that's the Hegelian dialectic right there.
It's
you know,
it is.
And you know,
I
was talking with my friend Ed yesterday, and we were just kind of both lamenting how, you know, we often make God in our own image, you know. And look, I'm the first to admit I've made God in my own image, because, I mean, what do I really have? I have what I learned in Sunday school. Okay, yeah, Sunday school. What I learned from my pastors and teachers over the years. What I learned from my parents. What I learned from Charles Ryrie theology book. What I used to teach. You know, I was steeped in that, all that stuff. And then I have my own understanding of the Bible. And it's crazy, because I probably know the Bible better than 98% of the people on planet Earth. And yet I can only understand God to the extent that of the things that I've studied. And it's so limited. It's so filtered, right? I have such a very limited understanding of God. And so what I would suggest for myself and for all of us is great amounts of humility. Okay. A huge amount. Well, so that when we meet somebody that sees things a little bit differently than us, just say, you know what? There's a lot I don't know. I do not have the corner on the truth. And I think if we could take that position, you know, we'd start to love each other again. But we get so haughty, we get so prideful, and, you know, I figured it out. I've got the right understanding, or my church does, you know, but we don't. You know, we'd have just a tiny, tiny little bit of the truth.
But Doug, you do understand that the front of the book is still valid. You have now, again, not saying you're smarter, but you no longer deny the heavens and the earth. You know, when Yeshua said, not one jot, not one tittle until heaven and earth pass away, you now believe that, and you don't teach it. It's not that you're smarter. It's not that you're a more loving person. And I put this up here because no, and we got another comment. LA says, I can't support replacement theology. When you have been indoctrinated into Christian Zionism or dispensationalism, when you hear something like what we're talking about, we are not talking about the church replacing Judah or Israel. We are saying that you need to go back, read your Bible, understand that it was Yah that united Israel into two different nations. The nation that you have been taught is Israel was just the nation of Judah. The other nation was conquered by Syria, and then they were scattered to and swallowed up by the nations. And it's not that we're smarter or anything like this. I was blind as a bat to this until 2017. And it was just, you know, my interest in prophecy. I started studying and realized that these are not Jewish feasts. Next thing you know, I figured out that Sabbath was not Jewish. Things of that nature. And it's Yah opening eyes, but you've got to do this. To see this, you've got to actually be willing to ask him, show me where I have been indoctrinated maybe into a system, because the system of dispensationalism, and they will apply that prayer about those who bless Israel, and they'll apply that only to the current nation state of Israel and to Jewish people. No, but yes, at the same point in time, Judah was part of Israel, is part of Israel, and will always be part of Israel, but they have never been all Israel. They're still not all Israel. Everybody in covenant is Israel. And if you can't hear that, it's just because that's the way you've been taught. And we know very, very smart people. Doug used to be a diehard dispensationalist. I did too. Doug has brothers I have brothers, and they just can't see this. I don't know why. Sometimes I think they don't want to see it. They want to be the church. They don't want to be Israel.
True.
And they think that it's anti-Judah to point out what the scripture says. Yeshua was said, your house is left to you desolate. He's talking to the house of Judah. It's like people don't want to read what scripture says. I am very not in favor of Judaism because it is an anti-Messiah religion. I'm not in favor of the Roman version on the other side of the equation because it is also anti-Messiah. It teaches a different Messiah than what is in scripture. That is not arrogance. That's just facts. You know, again, I don't support Judaism. I understand why Judah has been in unbelief. Romans 11 says it. We see all these, Yeshua says it. We see all the prophets saying this. But Yah has a plan for Judah. And at the very end of this age, when all these nations gather against Judah, they will look to him who they pierced. They will mourn. They will cry out, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Prophecy will be fulfilled, and Judah corporately will be saved. Then all Israel will be saved. It's not complicated unless you've been taught to only read it in that direction. What you got to say on that, Abraham?
Okay, Abraham, where are you? There you are.
Yeah,
okay, so you and Scott seem to agree that Trump has been selected by God to be the leader going forward. So why would God choose him, and what does God want to accomplish with this Trump man?
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, Leviticus 26, right, guys?
Oh, no, seriously, you're going there? Or Deuteronomy 28? So everybody, Abraham, tell them what 26 is all about, or 28.
Well, I will appoint those over you who hate you. Okay, so that's the curses of disobedience to God, because obviously our nation doesn't follow God both in spirit and truth. They've maybe got one or the other. And the way I like to call spirit and truth, like the Jews claim they have Torah, so they claim they have the truth. The Christians claim they have the spirit, but neither one walks fully in spirit and truth. But let me just see, when you go to Leviticus 26, is that not where we find it? I will appoint those who hate you to rule over you. It might not be there. I thought it was. I'm looking for it. But obviously Trump's going to play a role where it's going to be a bait and switch, just like last time he was in office. Okay, trust me, guys. I went door knocking for Trump. I handed out flyers saying, hey, you guys going to vote? That was back in 2016, the election there. I went to rallies in 2015. I mean, I was heavily involved, guys. I think I went to like 3 Trump rallies back in 2015, 16, that whole time frame. And so I was heavily involved. It was a bait and switch. You guys saw what happened. You guys saw what he did. I could go into more details, but I got, I published stuff here on YouTube land and on the internet, and I know what gets censored and what doesn't. Had stuff deleted recently. But it was a bait and switch 100%. So what's the bait and switch this time? Obviously, it's going to have to do with cryptocurrency, because there's articles coming out today. Trump is just going to turn the USA into the biggest crypto capital of the world. So it's going to have to do with crypto. It's going to have to do with AI. Obviously, Elon Musk is there as the director of Doge, whatever it is. I forget the whole agency that they're running, government efficiency. Obviously, it's important enough to have Elon in the mix, and he's big into crypto and AI. And then you see who he's surrounding himself with as well, like guys like JD Vance, who are directly connected to Palantir, which is a government surveillance data mining company that has done a bunch of stuff for the DoD, a bunch of, military industrial complex. The guy running that whole ship with Palantir, I forget his name offhand. I should know that, but he's heavily connected to JD Vance. And you just look at who he's connected to. You see who the players are. You see who he's putting in his cabinet, appointing to his cabinet. And it's pretty clear which direction we're going. It's exactly what you had mentioned earlier. I forget if it was Scott or Joel that mentioned it, but he has said, hey, we need a biometric scanning system to basically deal with illegal migration. So this crisis has been created. And now the damage control is there for the bait and switch. That's not really what this is about, because the United States today already has a good entry-exit system. You can enter in, you need to have documentation, you go to the checkpoints, whatever, you show your ID. It's to exit the country that Trump actually wants to put some of this biometric stuff in. And it's going to cost millions upon millions of dollars, but we know Trump loves to print money. He did it last time, especially 2020. And it's going to put the nation further into debt. Things are going to get more expensive. You're going to have more inflation, but that's where the UBI comes in, universal basic income. That's where you have Musk coming in to save the day. We're going to reward you for good behavior. You have senators. You have a lot of people talking about universal basic income now. We're all going to be rich together, guys. Didn't you know it's a socialist utopia? And it's just, you can see where this is going pretty quickly. It's just a matter of how far does it go until God puts an end to it, because I believe that's what we're going to see with the natural disasters.
So you're picking up on the fact that we're going to ramp up into this glorious state of money for everybody, 1920s, things like that. But then there will be a crash, and it'll be environmental and also, or cosmological, maybe, plus financial, plus. So it'll be about 10 different systems crashing at the same time, you think?
Yeah, and the way I derive that particular synopsis, or should I say prognosis, of the disease of sin in America, Torahlessness, lawlessness, guys, it's a big problem. You go to Ezekiel chapter 7. Ezekiel chapter 7, I believe, is specifically for the West, end times the West, Western nations, because of what I call the pride flag prophecy that's in there. You have to read it from the English Standard Version. I believe it's the only translation that really gets it correctly. But his beautiful ornament, his beautiful rainbow, they turned into an image of pride, it says in Ezekiel chapter 7. And I've broken this verse down in my work, of course, and I just see that pride has budded, doom has gone out, and we're here now, because as much as it seems like nothing is putting an end to the freight train of this system, this technocracy, this mixing of the public-private partnerships, Palantir, like I mentioned, all these companies coming together to do surveillance, biometric scanning, cryptocurrency, digital IDs, all these things coming together. As much as it seems like there's never going to be an end to it, prophecy seems to say otherwise. And what's very interesting is, yes, we know that there's these players at the tippy top of the pyramid, but it looks like something is going to go wrong. Someone's going to get double crossed somewhere, because the West is going to be subverted and caught off guard when that wasn't supposed to happen. It doesn't look like it's part of their plan. Although, yes, people like Zuckerberg have bunkers, and big old, ever doomsday bunkers. Bill Gates has all kinds of stuff. These people seem to be preparing, but it seems like they also at the same time are so drunk with power, they seem like they're invincible. So it's really confusing right now, but I think it's going to become very clear very quickly, and it's going to catch a lot of people by surprise.
It's like they're getting ready for the sixth seal. The kings of the earth
there you go.
Getting ready to go in their bunkers, because they know the wrath of the Lamb is coming. So
I totally agree, Scott. Amen.
Well, finally, we got an amen between you guys. That's awesome.
Joel stumbles on something every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, the sign for the sixth seal is coming up next year. March 13th, 14th, we're going to have the blood moon eclipse. And if we have the sun go from yellow to white to red to black. Yeah, I tell you what, guys, it is a cosmological sign. And so, Abraham and I both kind of study those earthquake patterns, and we've had a quiet period for the last 6-7 years of earthquakes. They're due, guys. They're really due in certain regions.
I really have to push back on that one, because if you take a close look at the text, why does the moon? I know you do, but let's look again. Why does the moon turn to blood, and the sun, you can't see it, by the way. Oh, and the stars you don't see at all. Why does that happen? Because smoke comes out of the abyss. It's not a blood moon thing. We did all that in 2014 and 15, and that was just all bunk. I mean, I myself got all excited. Oh my gosh, this is, and then I'm like, this is nothing. I finally got here, and I'm like, I was so wrong on that one. I was so totally wrong. I was talking about the blood moons way back in 2000, I don't know, 9, 10, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
and, I was like, oh my gosh, 2014 and 15, and I was still pre-trib back then. And I thought, oh, this is it, man. This is a sign, and it was Mark Biltz that started all that stuff. Hey, God bless him.
It is.
But he was, I think he's so wrong, because if we go back and we take a look, what happens in Revelation chapter 9? There's the abyss opens up, and guess what comes out of it? A whole lot of smoke. And guess what happens when smoke covers the sky? The moon turns to blood red. That's the color. Guess what happens to the sun? It turns dark, like it's covered in sackcloth, and the stars can't see them. I mean, just look what happened with some of those volcanic eruptions in Iceland. There's one, I can't remember how you pronounce that thing, back in 2011. And I remember seeing the pictures. I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is. You could see that the sun looked like it was covered with sackcloth. The moon looked blood red, and the stars, you couldn't see them. I myself saw the effects of a forest fire when I lived in Southern California, and I saw the moon, and it looked blood red, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of wild. Well, then finally, years later, I put 2 and 2 together, and I'm like, oh, all right. So the whole thing about a lunar eclipse, I just think it's completely off base. It's not at all what the text says. And
we'll wait and see. Because it does say
but I think it's
moon.
going to be another nothing burger. I mean, that's the problem.
Oh, it'll be an exciting
we have
nothing
so many
burger.
nothing burgers until we're like, I need something to eat, man. And
none of us are date setting. None of us are.
But you keep pushing that one.
Oh, yeah.
When is that, by the way? When is it?
March 13th, 14th sets the next cycle up of 9 of them.
When
through 2033.
When are most of us understanding that that Pesach, Passover, will be this year?
Okay, so March 13th, 14th is Purim, okay? And then we'll go into, the next month, which would be
okay, so and again, I can see how Purim was a historical event, and Halisa Elwan has a great book out on this, on Purim and how certain events may unfold on a future Purim. So again, that would be sort of like Steve Mutri would be a date watcher from things that have happened in history. I would say, Doug, we should watch, but to your point, with a heavy dose of heavy block of salt in it, not predicting that it's going to begin the day of the Lord. I personally believe that the sixth seal is beginning the day of the Lord. That is Judgment Day.
Yeah. That's when Jesus is already ripping open the sky. That's what it says. He's ripping open the sky.
The sky's already ripping up.
Little plug for everybody to tune in when Eddie.
It's all right, Brother Joel. I love you, man. I know we disagree quite strongly on that one.
I study physics every morning, so there you go.
When Eddie comes on again in a couple of weeks, we're going to be discussing this Day of the Lord and his understanding on Revelation 6 and how it matches up with Isaiah, as Doug has pointed out, in Joel.
Isaiah 24, yes.
Yeah, that I think that'll be a very, and everybody just buckle up, get your Bibles out, and be ready to hit pause, because Eddie's just going to rattle off things, and I'm going to ask you to prepare slides this time. So
we love Eddie. He's on the spectrum, but he just goes. So
go ahead,
Abraham,
got anything else to add to it?
So basically, we're going to have a situation where things just accelerate, because Trump is going to say, I want to do this, I want to do that. He's going to try to force peace with Russia and Ukraine. He's going to try to form an Abraham Accord. So you've got Jared Kushner that's behind the scenes working on that already. He's best friends with MBS, Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia, who has not taken power yet, but he's working on it. So Abraham, where are things going to go? Is Trump going to push for peace? And will it be a true peace?
Hey, Abraham, what's your opinion, dude?
Yeah.
Well,
don't put Abraham on the spot. Where is it going to go?
I want your prediction right now.
Let me show you this real quick. And by the way, I want to say this, Doug. I appreciate you like crazy, man. I used to be pre-trib because we're Calvary Chapel guys, man. That's part of the core doctrine of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, the whole 9 yards.
Yep, 1,000%, man.
Yeah, we both.
Even as a little boy, I could read First Thessalonians chapter 5 and 2 Thessalonians 2.
Yeah.
And my dad was hardcore pre-trib and wrote books on it, Abraham.
Oh wow.
I was like, Daddy, it says right here, his coming and our gathering happened after these two things. I was taught to read English, not Greek, obviously, but I'm like, this is not fitting.
Well, I did mention this, but my parents were missionaries for a season as well from Calvary Chapel, the organization. So yeah, we have a lot in common, Doug. I don't know if we've talked about these things in the past.
We haven't. No.
Yeah. we go back to the same roots, right? The Foursquare before Chuck
Yeah.
Smith and all that. They're
Yeah.
very charismatic and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
anyways, I want to just piggyback off of Doug's point. I don't know if you guys can see that. You see palm trees. Those are date palms, like what you would find in Israel. And then you have a test of the atom bomb when it first came out. That was in the 1951. So when you look at Joel chapter 2, and I don't know if this is going to help you, Joel, in discerning these types of things, but it definitely goes to Doug's point, because he's talking about literal smoke coming out and the moon turning into blood. When you look at the word that he uses for pillars of smoke, Joel in chapter 2, verse 30, I believe it is,
31,
pillars of smoke.
Yep.
It's actually the word timara or timarot, pillars, timarot, which is tree, a date palm spreading at the top. So actually it could be interpreted to mean nuclear explosions of palm, like mushroom clouds. I don't know if you guys have thought about that or considered it before, but that's something that I
haven't seen it. That's in the Hebrew, huh? Okay.
Yeah. He could have used, so there's like 4 or 5 different words that are used in the Tanakh for pillar, Jacob's pillar, Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt. Those are totally different words.
The earth is on pillars, literally. I mean, it's literally on pillars. I'm joking.
Anyways, threw me for a loop a little bit, but the pillar.
We're not doing flat Earth tonight, guys.
Yeah, biblical cosmology. I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit hole right
No,
now.
No.
I feel dumber anytime I talk to a surfer.
A pillar of fire, pillar of cloud. That's a different pillar. That's used to describe God's glory when they're dwelling in the wilderness in the tabernacle. The word there is very intentional, because in the Hebrew, this is something I learned, there's no word for mushroom in the entire Hebrew Bible. There's no word for it, mushroom. So he used the closest thing that he could find to describe a mushroom cloud, which is a palm tree, which I showed you the photo. If you compare a palm tree, a date palm in Israel, or just the whole Mediterranean, Middle East, to a mushroom cloud of an atomic bomb or nuclear warhead like they are these days, big ones, yeah, it looks exactly the same. That's how he would describe it.
Like a tamo. That's interesting. That's really interesting. Wow.
Okay, it is cool. I like that. Okay, I would argue that's World War III. That's not the sixth seal.
Well, like I said, I don't know where it fits. I'm different, and I've talked to you about this, Joel, privately, but
yeah,
I'm very different. I go to the Tanakh. I touch Revelation when it confirms things in the Tanakh, but I don't really touch Revelation that much in my work. I do, but not really a whole lot.
Yeah, you're in 230. He's in
Revelation. All it's doing is taking a lot of snippets. Probably most of Revelation are snippets out of the Tanakh.
That's right. Yeah.
I know.
I mean,
when it comes to, okay, this seal, this bowl, this trumpet, this, and here's the order, and we got it figured out, man. Like I can't do that, because I just don't. It doesn't make any sense to me, honestly, to be honest with you guys. And that's where I draw the line with my knowledge and understanding. I'm like, I'll get to it someday, but there's certain things that are very concrete to me, and I stick with those types of things. And I just could never figure out chronology with Revelation.
It's because it's arranged thematically and not chronologically. That's the distinction. So the sixth seal is already the second coming of Jesus. And then we have these reduplications of where we come to the end, and then we go back to the beginning or pretty close, and then we see it again, and then we see it from a whole different set of camera angles. I like to think of it like a car chase, and then in the movies the car explodes. How many times do you see that car explode? I don't know, like 4, 5, 6 times, right? Like they've got it from this angle, and then from the top, and then maybe from down below, and then when it goes off that embankment, and all these different ways. And so you get to see that car explode like 5 different times, right? But it was the same explosion. And I think that's what's happening in Revelation. We have fewer events, but we have more camera angles, so that we can really get a lot of detail on that. And to Scott's point, it really is just a kind of a retelling of what we see in the Old Testament. I mean, we see, Isaiah chapter 2, Isaiah 13, Isaiah 24, Isaiah 25, 6, 7, 8. Those are all like hugely, the book of Revelation.
It helps organize the jigsaw puzzle. Okay. we've got all these scattered pieces of the puzzle throughout the prophets, throughout the Torah, throughout the Psalms, throughout, we've got all these pieces, even Proverbs, talking about the harlot. Everybody thinks that that's just about going and cheating on your wife. No, that is about the Babylon. That's about the false religion. That's about what has crept into both houses. And for anybody that ever accuses me of being anti-Judah, you have not listened to this show long enough. I probably beat up on Romanized version of Jesus and how it's been taught way more than I ever talk about Judah and Judaism. Tons more, because again, our audience is generally not going to be your Orthodox Jew. It's not. It's going to be those that are still in that part of the Babylonian religious system. I'm not saying you're not saved. I'm not saying you're not going to be in the kingdom. Don't hear me say that. But you're still wrapped up in part of that harlot religion, and Yah wants you out. He wants you to start getting your garments clean, because the bridegroom is coming. Israel was not told to not touch a woman just because Yah didn't want them to have sex with their wives, although that was part of it. That was the physical. He wants you to get all the way away from any elements of Babylon, whether they be 6-pointed stars, Christmas trees, 9-branch menorahs, or Easter bunnies, or eggs, or Ishtar Day. Again, unlearn the lies. That's and I'm an equal opportunity, if anything, more so against the Christian riverbank, as far as calling people to be. I want everybody to just believe Yeshua, Jesus, meant what he said. Not one jot, not one tittle.
The Babylonian star was 8 points, by the way, just so that we're clear on that.
Do what now?
The Babylonian star was 8
he's
points.
right.
The hexagram is not biblical. Get it out of the house. It's just not biblical. I'm not saying it's evil.
Another show for another day.
Again, well, we might as well, like a synagogue from Capernaum had swastikas, 5-pointed pentagrams, and a hexagram on it. And it has swastikas on it. Nobody would ever associate swastika these days as not being an evil symbol and occultic. They all go back. You can see them in the ancient Babylon's, the steles and cultures. You see hexagrams. They're just not biblical. I'm not saying that Jews are sitting there worshiping a star, but they don't serve any purpose in God's house. He would have said, I want you to have a 6-pointed star, but instead we're giving very specific instructions.
It's interesting because in the temple, you actually had depictions of the cherubim, which is really, when you go back and you look at the ancient Near East, you find that is the Anzu bird or the griffin. It's got a lot of different names, but it's essentially a depiction of what we would know as Satan, which is incredibly ironic because he was one of the cherubim, right? So sometimes we can paint ourselves in a theological corner when we say, well, this particular symbol is evil or it's good or whatever, when a lot of times the symbols initially had, they were neither good nor bad. But then as time went on, they started to have a particular meaning. And we know that the cherubim will once again be depicted in the millennial temple. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff on that. But I didn't want to necessarily get on that topic. So Abraham, this was so fun, man. Thank you for joining us, dude. This was really amazing. Yeah, I think
come back.
Yeah, definitely come back. There's so much more we can talk about.
We didn't scratch the surface on maybe some things I thought we were going to talk about.
We didn't talk about safe zones and prepping and things like that. So he's obviously in the safe zone, guys. He's way up high on the western side of the state.
How's the skiing over there? Is it any good?
Yeah, in Durango. They're skiing in Durango. It's pretty close.
Okay. Oh, that's true. Okay.
It's not too far from Aspen, Eagle Vale, and then Telluride. Right. Telluride is a lot of.
There's great. Oh man, you're good. Okay. You got good skin over there. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, again, thank you, everybody. We put the Telegram group in the chat, so check that out. Telegram is kind of like Messenger or WhatsApp or something like that. It's a messaging app. I think it's amazing. It's very secure, but of course, make sure when you join that you just know what you're doing. We cannot guarantee that everyone that joins it is going to necessarily, have our worldview. So be smart, but do join us. We'll have continue the conversation there. It will be the après, the après show, right? We'll have there I'm going to say après ski, but basically, we can keep the conversation going, and you can recommend new topics and or new guests in there as well. So just check that out, and thanks for joining us. We will see you next week. Until next time, God bless.